Dante wrote, "The path to paradise begins in hell." Join Deacon Prendergast and David Fortin as they discuss the tools men need to build the domestic church and the spiritual weapons to defend it. This is Through the Fire.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Through the Fire. I'm David Fortin, joined by my good friend, Deacon Prendergast.
Hey.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
Doing okay. Hey, how's the weather getting down there in Florida?
Well, it was a little bit cool. I think the temperature dropped below 70.
Oh, okay.
Here in Florida, there's basically two seasons.
Yeah.
There's summer and pre-summer.
Uh-huh.
That's basically it.
Hot and hotter.
It's hot and hotter.
Yeah. Well, you know
Right.
what? We have a guy who's just come back from a Mexican dinner. So his tongue is burning right now as we speak and wants to talk. He is truly a good friend of mine. He is, I met him by chance at a Knights of Columbus meeting in New Haven, Connecticut.
All right.
He is the one and only Pat King. He lives outside of Boise, Idaho, but he's the director of core for the Knights of Columbus out there in Boise. He has his own radio segment on Salt and Light called Man Cave, and we're going to talk a little bit about that during the show. But I want to introduce my good friend, Pat King.
Ho, how's it going?
Oh, we
Pat.
are doing well. Pat, the reason we wanted to have you on the show is because you taught me at my age, you've taught me a very important life lesson, and that is our choices. So the way we see our lives can make us bitter or better. Because of your experiences, you've demonstrated that through the way you live to me. So that's what we really want to talk to you about. Pat, just where did you come from? How did you get started? And
Well, I came from my parents, for one.
Okay.
You sure
they
about
gave
that?
birth.
Yeah.
They gave birth to me in Iowa, and they raised me. They moved to Texas, and eventually I found them. So, no, it's I was I'm the middle child of 7, and I was mainly raised in Idaho, back where when my parents divorced, my mom needed help from her family, and she was born and raised in Rupert, Idaho. So they came back to the Idaho area. And when I was 11 years old, 11 or 12, I think it was 11, 12, something like that. But anyway, and it's pretty much where I've been most of my life, with a short segment back in Palm Springs area for about 11 years, where I met my wife and all my kids were born.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't want to raise my kids there. I wanted to raise them where even though I hated the move from Southern California to Twin Falls, Idaho, that podunk little town of Twin Falls where everybody drove around in a pickup truck, had a rifle rack in there,
Mm-hmm.
a gun rack in their truck. And I thought that was standard issue. You buy a truck and you get a gun rack, and
Sure.
and so, but as I grew up, and I missed a lot of things from California, the baseball and all the sports and all the available coaches and all the higher end level stuff. But as I grew up, I spent a lot of my childhood exploring Idaho, Southern Idaho, the Canyon Rim, and biking out in the country, and just never really understood how much freedom I had as a child to just explore without. You didn't fear anything. You didn't fear being accosted or grabbed or assaulted or anything like that. We just rode our bikes and did what we wanted to do. And Mom's rule was just be home for dinner.
Pat, I'm starting to follow this guy on I think it's on YouTube, and he does Idaho history, and I'm amazed at Idaho's history, because a lot of the buildings, a lot of the old buildings are often like the 1910s.
Yeah.
When you drive down, there's like 3 or 4 houses right in my area. The houses are older than the country.
Yeah.
So
not here.
No, it's
everything's so young here comparatively.
It really is. And when you look at it, it looks the period, and I think Hollywood has done a great job at showing that period very well. And it just matches so perfectly. I know that's jumping off subject. Pat, you had reached a pinnacle in your life. You were a wealthy guy, had a family, and then some things happened. Tell us a little bit about how that downward turn, how that's affected your life.
Well, the wealth really didn't happen. I was always good at making money. I was one of those guys, high energy, willing to do just about anything anyone asked me to do work wise. It was ethical, moral. I mean, I didn't do things that were illegal. I wouldn't steal, or I wouldn't, sell drugs or anything like that. But I was just willing to work hard. I told someone the other day that I was a breakfast waiter, a breakfast cook, and a breakfast waiter, but also was a bartender. And so I got used to working long days and sleeping 4 hours a day. I'd close a bar one night and I'd wake up and 4 hours later and go cook breakfast at a restaurant. So, I was just willing to do, because I grew up in Jimmy Carter's era where it was really tough to make a living, to make a wage, and gas prices were high and stuff like that. So I just learned, and my grandparents grew up in the Depression. So I just learned that you just worked hard and eventually things would pay off. And really, I didn't gain that wealth until after my son had passed away. And I was building a business, but his demands, his time at the hospital in and out, and our need to be a unified family was far more important than me making a lot of money. I grew the business, but not like I did after he passed away. And a lot of that growth came from the fact that after he died, I was so numb to the world that all I could focus on was just work. I mean, nothing else seemed to, you can ask me anything that happened between late 2004 and around 2007. And I don't have a whole lot of recollection of things, of history, times like World Series champions or what shows were on or anything. I cannot even tell you. I'm just so numb. And when I see a clip of something, that was on during that time.
Yeah. So maybe for the sake of the audience, let's back up a little bit, because, certainly what you're speaking about is a very transformative experience when your son passed away. But let's back up a little bit so that the audience has a little bit more context, if you're comfortable enough to do so.
Sure.
Share with the audience the circumstances, what was going on in your life, what was going on in his life, and kind of, paint the background picture. And then, perhaps we can lead through that, the details of how this impacted your faith and the contrast between the before you, the deep in the mud you, and the after you.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised Catholic, but to marry this woman I was in love with, I chose not to continue to going. And I can tell you, I thought I had a bad priest, and he was a very liberal priest, and I grew up in a very conservative area. So I decided that as the church was changing, I didn't really know the church as well as I do now, but I thought the church had changed, and this priest was just the forefront of what was coming up. And I said, let's just find some conservative Christian church to go to. So we started going to a Foursquare church, and I married this woman, and she had a child from a previous marriage. And then we had our first child, and long story, we took a test in California that showed some effect in the test, a negative or a positive. I can't remember what the test result was, but their advice was to abort that child because it would possibly be born with all sorts of problems and be a burden to the state. And that worried me because being raised Catholic, abortion was not ever an effort.
Which unfortunately, there's a lot of couples out there, that get that same kind of message from the doctors, and they don't give a whole lot of consideration. They just blindly move through whatever the advice is, whatever the pending or whatever they think is best, without really spending a whole lot of time praying on it or suffering through the agony of the decision. So, I mean, at least you were there. You were there going through the agony of a decision.
Yeah, we met with our pastor at the time, and he prayed with us. We met at a Carl's Journey. He prayed with us. And then when the child was born, she was perfect. I mean, absolutely perfect. And as she grew up, she had talents beyond anything I ever had. A talented athlete. She was a gifted drawer. She's very creative. She had so many talents. Beautiful young woman, grew up to be talented. When she was born as whole and complete and perfect as she was, I just thought, well, we're not taking that test again. We're not going through that.
Right.
That's wrong. We're not going to do that. And so when we were pregnant with our second child, which was our son, the doctor, the OBGYN noticed some anomalies that could be alarming, but you said, you know what, doesn't matter. We're not going through that. We're just going to go through the birth and see what God has to offer us. Well, he was born with a lot of problems. And in fact, we got to look at it. The doctor pointed out the obvious stuff, and then within 15 seconds had whisked him away to the NICU. And we never got to touch him or talk to him or even hold him for the first couple hours of his life. And when we finally did get to see him, he was in an incubator with all sorts of tubes and wires and things all over hooked up to him. So
can you share with the audience maybe just one or two of the major issues that was brought to your attention?
Well, he had club feet, severe club feet. Then he had scoliosis of the spine. He had a bald spot in his head that he called it. I don't remember what he called it, but they said it was something that was part of his condition. Okay. And they would send us to a geneticist to determine what it was. And then they showed us the shape of his ears. One was lower. They also pointed out that he had a recessed mandible and a real bad curve in his spine. And so he pointed out all those physical things. But then when they put him in the incubator, they started telling us about some of the medical things. He wasn't oxygenating very well, so he had to put air into the incubator for him to raise his levels up. But the one thing that caused most of his problems down the road was the one thing they missed, and that was a huge hole in his heart that wasn't discovered for over 2.5 months. And after about 3 weeks in the hospital, we got to hold him. They were gavage feeding, which means they were sticking a tube down his nose and feeding him solid, like Pediasure with cereals in it. And that was actually hard for his stomach to digest, which also caused other problems. Okay. And so, but it was a brand new NICU. They'd never had experienced this. I mean, they were not even a year old. They were like 4 or 5 months into it. And so Lance was probably one of their most problematic child, and they'd had there yet. And we'd get to take him home after 3 weeks, and he's just not thriving. He's not doing well. He's taking 2 hours to drink a bottle, and then he throws it right back up. And my wife at the time, she was a saint. She was so patient with him and didn't get angry, and he was cranky and just didn't do well and always throwing up his food, and it took forever. But she was so patient and loving that's the reason why he made it through those first couple months. And but she had to go back to work since she was a school teacher and had the insurance, and we were going to lose our benefits if she didn't go back. So we got a special nurse to take care of Lance, and things were okay. And then we had a daycare that was closer to. We didn't know what was going on. We just didn't understand because no doctor told us there were any problems. And finally, my mom was a nurse, but she lived in Twin. I'm in Palm Springs area, and Lance just is starting to fail. And
so if I may, so at this point in time, just to kind of recap a little bit, that you're bringing home a baby that has issues that need to be dealt with, not 100% sure to the extent that they're going to be problematic over time. Right. And so your wife is, as very typical with new mothers, with a mother with a new child, she's kind of the primary. Right. And you're supporting her. Right. Yep. And you're noticing that your son is just not thriving and perhaps maybe even beginning to slip in the opposite direction. And so I'm curious, at this point in time, what are the emotions that are rising up and the conversations that you're having between you and your wife? Well, actually, I've been asked that question a couple of times. It was all just concern about him and how we do the best we can for him. It was almost a tag team between us, and I worked so she could stay home, and then she eventually had to go back to work, and I ended up staying home. But I worked my schedule around him and her so I could be home. But it was kind of like where there's so much going on that you're kind of like on autopilot. It becomes not to say that it's not loving, but it's kind of mechanical where it's like, okay, what do we have to do next?
Exactly. And we had two other children at home. We had a 1.5-year-old and a 10.5-year-old.
So you also have to take care of their emotional needs.
Right.
And all the stress that goes along with that.
Right. And so eventually just before Christmas, Lance was just really uncomfortable and he was gaining weight. But, again, I'm not a medical physician. Yeah. I don't know these things. And he's gaining weight, but he wasn't doing well. And I need you to go back that when he was born with all those problems.
Yeah.
I thought God was punishing me. I really thought I was being burdened with this child. I took it as my past behavior. I looked at it as David when he met with Bathsheba and got birth to a child, and God punished David for his actions.
Are you saying that, Pat? Are you saying that because you recognize that you had previously lived a very arrogant, self-consumed lifestyle or something?
And I left his church. I denied God. I mean, I didn't deny the Eucharist, but I left his church. I was a premarital sex guy. I lived with the woman before I got married. I mean, I did everything wrong. Didn't even seek permission from a priest or a bishop to get married outside the church. And I just thought I was being punished for my past sins and behavior. And I thought I was being burdened with this child. Because when I knew I had a boy in the womb, I had him playing for the Dodgers. I mean, I literally believe I had him playing for the Dodgers and living vicariously through him, my love for baseball. And so when he was born with all these problems, it was a big letdown. It was a very disappointing, burdensome, why me, God? Why are you punishing me? Why are you doing this to me? Why am I stuck with this child? But I still, because I love children and I know that this is what I have, I'm going to do everything I can. And I did it with love, but I won't say that it was a proud love or a happy love. It was
more of an obligatory love.
An obligatory love, absolutely. And so, but I still had concerns. And so when he started to really just crash, this is just days before Christmas, I called my mom and I said, Mom, what do we do? Because we were with an HMO. And if you don't call, get an appointment, you got to have a recommendation for a doctor, blah, blah, blah. And so Mom said, just take him to the emergency room. They got to take him. Don't ask questions. Just don't take him there. And we did. That night, we took him to the emergency room and checked him in. And they said, oh, he's not doing so well. He's oversaturated with fluids. We're going to dry him out. They still didn't know he had a hole in his heart. Now, this is 2.5 months after birth. They schedule a specialist, a pediatric cardiologist in L.A. to see him just before New Year's Eve, just before New Year's. I think we were like December 29th or 30th. I can't remember exactly. We drive to L.A. just for a checkup. Now, we aren't planning on anything but a checkup, right? And we see this doctor. Now, Lance was always a squirmer. And so the doctor had to sedate him to where he could do an ultrasound on his heart because he just moved around too much. So finally, we're talking and just talking calmly, peacefully, nothing alarming. Finally, Lance settles down in the sedation, and the doctor's just scoping around, looking at things, and he's talking to us, trying to describe what's going on. And after a few minutes, he goes silent, picks up the phone, puts the phone back down, looks at me and says, come over here, I want to show you something. And he holds the ultrasound wand over, and he had one that showed colors. Yeah. And he goes, see that? And I said, yeah, it looks like a flag waving. He said, yeah, it's not supposed to be doing that. He said it didn't form a wall between the third and fourth chambers. And he said that's his heart's not pumping like it's supposed to. And he's got a hole in his heart the size of a quarter in a man's heart.
Just so that the audience understands, correct me if I'm wrong, but these colored sonograms, if I'm not mistaken, ultrasounds, what the colors that you're looking at, if I remember correctly, it's like the red is the oxygenated blood and the blue is the
the way he explained it was the red was the blood coming at us, the blue was the blood going away. In the heart. You could see it going up and down through the heart.
So coming at us would be coming from the lungs to the heart to get pumped out to the body. Right. So you're looking at basically a blender, a mixture of these colors.
Yeah, and then you could see it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool to see what technology could do, and thank God it did.
Sure.
But it really looked like a flag waving in the wind.
Wow.
I mean, you could just see it fluttering about, and he goes, "That's not supposed to be like that." And he goes, "He should have been operated the day he was born."
Now, your wife is with you when this is all
Yes.
taking place. Okay.
Yes, and we're both like, your jaw drops. We're both
Yeah.
going like, and he's going, "It's amazing he's still alive."
So at this moment, are thoughts of God's punishing me, are they coming back into your mind?
At that point, I was a selfish guy, but not always not that so. No, actually, I wasn't thinking anything but, oh my gosh, what are we going to do?
Okay.
And soon after, he says, well, they're coming to get him, to take him down and prep him for surgery, open heart surgery at 6 a.m. the next morning. So a gurney comes in, they load Lance up and start hooking him up to all sorts of things, and off he goes. Now, we're in LA, and we are not planning. I mean, we're 2 hours away from home. Our other children are being watched by her mom and her brother.
Yeah.
And so we have to call them up. But I have a family member in LA, and I said, here's our situation. And she didn't hesitate but to say, you can stay with us. So with the clothes that we brought on our backs, we literally went back and forth from LA and drove through. Now, this is also during the Rodney King, shortly after the Rodney King riots. A lot of burned down, damaged buildings. And one of the things we'd do is we'd be going home at night, and a cop pulled us over and said, just keep on driving through. Don't stop at stop signs. Don't stop at stoplights. Make sure you look both ways before you do. You won't get a ticket for doing that, because if you stop, then that's when you got carjacked.
Yeah.
And so we did that. During the day, it was totally different. So we were there for 4 days, and then we took him home, and
they were able to repair the heart, the whole
Oh,
heart?
yeah.
Okay.
And so that was done. And the problem is that, and I tend to believe this is the reason why he lived only to be 12 and not still alive today, was that lack of finding the hole in his heart for 2.5 months caused so many other problems, internal organ issues, from swelling of saturation and stuff like that. He eventually died from suffocation from blood clots that appeared from his liver into his lungs. So those complications caused, I believe, his short. But what are you going to do? You can't change it. It was done. Suing a doctor for something like that, what's it going to do? It's not going to bring our son back. Fortunately, doctors learn from stuff like this, and I'm glad that they do. But I still wasn't in love with my son yet. I mean, I was in love with the obligation and stuff. But it wasn't until the following year, when we had clubfoot surgery on him, I spent 31 out of 34 days at his bedside, 24 hours a day.
So how old was he with the heart surgery?
At 2.5 months.
Okay, 2.5. So this is all wow, that's a really, really short time frame that all of this is happening.
Yeah.
So 2.5 months old, you're in LA, heart repair surgery. Now you're back home. About 2 years later,
and he was doing well. The heart surgery was doing well. So now other doctors thought it was time to start moving on to
the other things.
Right.
So so 2 years after that, now you're moving on to the clubfoot surgery.
1 year after.
A year
exactly.
After that. Okay.
Yeah, just before Christmas again.
Okay.
And it's like late November, early December when we go in for clubfoot surgery. Something was supposed to be a simple recovery for a day or two and go home.
Yeah, of course, it's not going to be simple. Of course not.
Oh, no. Because I took a shower because I'd been there for 2 days already. The nurses kind of didn't pay attention to him, and he almost died from suffocation because they gave him too much morphine, and he couldn't breathe on his own.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was another problem. And so I come back, and he's blue. I yell bloody whatever to get your butts in there and take care of my son. And they pull out a huge mucus plug, revive him, and then whisk him off to another PICU.
Right.
And where I spend the next 31 out of 34 days at his bedside, going home only on late Saturday evenings, coming back on Sunday to get a good night's rest. But
where's your wife during that period of time?
She was teaching. She had the insurance. She was a teacher. We still had 2 kids at home. And I had, like I said, altered my work schedule. I was a landscaper, so I could adjust my schedule. And I stayed at his bedside. And again, I'm still thinking, I'm mad at God. In fact, in another interview I did, I said I actually hated God at this point.
Yeah.
And I tell him, I said, well, you have to hate God. You have to believe in God.
Right. Well, we'll talk more about that. We'll talk more about that in the second part of the show. But I'll say this to you: good. I'm glad you were yelling at God.
Yeah, I was angry with God. I was mad.
Good for you.
The thing was that I got about an hour's sleep a day for those whole 31 days until I went home. And one of the great things about it was I was told David this, when I started writing the book about this situation, this time in my life with my son, the working title is Born a Burden, Became a Blessing. When I'm writing that part, I'm sitting there going, gee, if someone asked me to do that today, to stay at their bedside 24 hours a day and get no sleep or little sleep and comfort them all the time, I'd say, you're crazy. I can't do that. And then I realized the only reason why I was able to do that, because even though I hated God, was mad with God, God was the one propping me up that whole time.
Sure.
He gave me the strength and the endurance to withstand that. So
and it's also a testament, Pat. It's also a testament to having, even if it feels broken, it's still a testament to having a genuine, authentic relationship. Because when you can identify who it is that you're sacrificing for, as opposed to just some ambiguous kind of non-specific sacrifice, when you can pinpoint it, like you were able to certainly with your son, that kind of changes the dynamics.
That's all the time we have this week. Tune in next week at this same time for the conclusion of this broadcast.
Well, you know the saying of you lay down your life for love of another, Yeah. You don't actually have to die. You just have to do something so unselfish, so unaware of what it's causing, how it's affecting you. For someone else.
In a way, you are dying. I mean, it's kind of, it's the same expression that John the Baptist speaks about, where he says, I must decrease so that you can increase. He's basically saying, I need to die to what I want so that I can be a vessel of service to you.
We got to take a break right now. When we come back, we will continue this great conversation. Pat King.
The preceding program was the Spirit of Truth Radio Arts original program. Forecastingthe.net.